period, I gotta punctuate it. I said I loved your shirt, but behind your back I said I hate it. The lightning strike me down, if I lied, me no one be around when my tongue's untied. Everybody says it's okay, all the little things I say with my big fat mouth. La 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 la. With my big fat mouth.
My big fat mouth gets me in trouble.
Today we are going to continue our sermon series, My Big Fat Mouth, with week 2. Last week was about gossip. Anybody in here? Don't raise your hands. Nobody in here deals with gossip anymore because we have listened to that sermon over and over again, and we will no longer do so. So this sermon series really is about stepping all over your toes. I don't know if you've realized that. We're going to talk about gossip. We're going to talk about complaining today. Aren't you glad you came to church? And next week we're going to talk about lying. Because I don't know if you know this, but we get in trouble with our mouths a lot. I grew up as a 16-year-old boy. I remember saying things to my father that got me in really big trouble. And in Lower Alabama, you don't put your kids in timeout. There's a lot of controversy about spanking, but in Lower Alabama, it's considered a must if you were a parent. And I got in really big trouble. I remember getting spanked at 16 years old. Yeah. I also remember my big fat mouth getting me in trouble with my father, who had a little bit of a temper. And if he's listening to this, Dad, I love you. I'm sorry for being such a punk. But I remember I was about 16 years old, and I said something to my dad when he was driving the car that will go unsaid in church. Cannot believe I still said it. And he pulled that car over, almost wrecked it, and my mother had to hold my dad back from whooping my tail. And that would not have been a spanking. That would have been a beat down because I was old enough to get one and deserved one. I got in trouble growing up with my big fat mouth. And now that I'm older, have a big boy job, have a little bit more responsibility, and have kids, I still get in trouble every now and then with my big fat mouth. But hopefully today, as I speak, it won't just be to you, it'll be to me as well. So today we're going to talk about complaining. Does anybody in here ever complain? Yeah, good. See, everybody actually answered that one correctly. So we can just skip lying. I want to start by telling you a story. My kids are not in here, and I'm not going to tell you who it was. But yesterday, I took my 2 oldest to a skate park. And it's a skate park, I think it's in Schoten, and it has these ramps where you can take a bicycle or whatever thing that rolls and go on these ramps. And my kids have been begging to go there for a long time. Ever since I opened my big fat mouth and told them about it, I hear about it every weekend. Can we go to the skate park? Can we go to the skate park? Sure. And yesterday I said, okay, well, let's go to the skate park. But we're going to ride our bikes. It's about 5-6 kilometers between our house and there. My kids don't understand what that really means. And so they were like, yeah, let's ride our bikes. And I said, well, it's a long way. And they said, well, it's okay. We can do it. We're big. And so we get there, okay. And then when we get there, the complaining starts, right? They've been wanting to go to this place for a long time. I give in. I say give in. I wanted to go as well. It looked cool, right? Except I didn't have the scooter. I was just trying to keep them from killing themselves the whole time because they were wanting to just, do all kind of X Games stuff, which would have been cool, but I would have gotten in trouble with my wife. So we get there, and the complaining starts because all these things are like, you really kind of need to know what you're doing to do tricks on these things. I mean, there's a half pipe that is, taller than me, right? And a 6 and a 9-year-old that have been riding scooters for not very long can't really do that. And so they started complaining about the fact that they couldn't do the tricks that there were some other kids there doing. And so I tried to make a teachable lesson out of that, where if you practice and all those things. And so there was complaining that went on there. Now, again, they've been begging to go here. We get there, and they start complaining. We leave, and we've been on our bikes 2 minutes, maybe even like 2 seconds. And all of a sudden, everybody's legs hurt, right? So I feel bad for Jackson because he's 6. His legs are, about that long. So he's got to pedal about 10 times for every one pedal I have. Now, I knew that going into it, but literally every 15 seconds between there and the way home, there was something from one of the two. Again, I'm not going to point out who did most of the complaining, but it was either the hill is too steep, or when I go down, it's too fast. You're too far ahead of me. You're too close. It's too bumpy. It's too hot. I'm sweating, right? Every 15 seconds the whole way. And I say that to say that I think that I know and I'm assuming you as well, because we're all human, do that all the time. We want to do something. We even pray to God for something. It's given to us. And then just like with my kids at the skate park, we immediately start complaining. Anybody on here ever prayed for a job? Ever complained about the same job you prayed for? Yeah, again, you all are lying because we've done it, right? Prayed for, okay, God, I need financial freedom. I want a job. And then all of a sudden, they expect you to show up at 8 o'clock. Gosh, I didn't sign up for that job. And they want you to stay till 5, and it ruins your social life and all those things that happen when you get a job, right? So we all do it. We all pray. We all want to enter into these things, enter seasons of life, pray for a kid, get a kid, and all of a sudden the complaining starts. You got to change diapers all the time, that type of thing. Or anybody in here ever worked out before? Ever said, I need to lose weight? And that first time at the gym, you feel kind of strong, but what happens 3 days later? You feel like you've been hit by a truck, right? And so then we start complaining, I'm so sore, I'm so sore. Well, listen, you picked up a weight for the first time in 10 years. You're going to hurt a little bit. So, all right, I say all that to start stepping on your toes, and we are going to jump right in. So at the end of the day, complaining is a choice. And I want to, if you don't hear anything else today, complaining is a choice. Two people with the same situation. You have one who will do nothing but complain about it, and one that will be eternally grateful for it. And so it's always a choice. It's always a choice. The Bible says choose life, not death. And it says that for a reason, because especially when it comes to complaining, it's your choice. And I'll be honest with you, from my standpoint, there's nothing that annoys me more than when I hear somebody complaining over and over and over again. And the reason why it annoys me is that I struggle with it. And the thing that you struggle with the most is probably the thing that annoys you the most about other people. Anyway, that's me preaching to me. So, we are going to jump in. You need to know that your words have power. The Bible is full of this. It talks about the words that come out of your mouth can bring life or death. There is no middle ground. And what you say is important. How you say things are important. If you identify yourself as a Christian, let me just go ahead and get it out there. Complaining has no part of your life. Now, I'm also going to differentiate between complaining and then also realizing there's a problem. Because there is a difference, right? Complaining isn't just there's a problem that needs to be fixed, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, James chapter 3, verses 1 through 12, I would encourage you to read the whole thing, but I'm going to boil it down to you. The parts that jump out about our words, James, who was a brother of Jesus, says that our words are like a rudder on a large ship. In other words, your life is going in a direction. Your life direction changes by how you speak. Your words are like the spark that sets a forest on fire. You have the ability to set your entire life on fire. You have the ability to set your marriage on fire. Anybody ever made that mistake? Hey, don't raise your hand, right? So here's the deal. We've all done it. We've all said things. We've all gotten in trouble with our big fat mouth. And the problem is with words is once you say them, you can't unsay them, right? And that's the reason why they're like a rudder. They can steer your life. They're like a spark that can literally set you on fire, which is not always a good thing. But the cool thing is they can bring life or death. The words that you say have so much power that they will bring life or death, not just in your life, but in the lives of others. You also need to know that if you're in here and you're a Christian, you may very well likely be the closest that your coworkers, your family, your friends ever get to Christ. I want to say that again. You may be the closest that your coworkers, your friends, your family, classmates, colleagues, whoever it is, you may be the only Jesus they ever get to see in their lives. And complaining has no part of our lives. None. So, the Bible talks about the fact that what comes out of our mouth isn't a word problem. It's a heart problem. Jesus says this in Luke 16:45, what you say flows from what's in your heart. Now, the cool thing is that today there's hope. Maybe you are a perpetual complainer. I'm not going to point anybody out, but I'm just saying, maybe you know this about yourself, that you speak more negative than positive, that you complain more than you praise, that you complain more than you give thanks. I don't know, maybe, but we all are on the spectrum somewhere, and there's hope for all of us, because thank goodness this isn't just a word problem. This is not behavior modification. Walking with Jesus, you don't just have to change your behavior. The cool thing is that you serve a God, and if you're in here and you're not a Christian, you need to know that God is a God who changes hearts. Because the words that come out of your mouth are a heart problem. They're not a word problem. From the overflow of the mouth comes from the heart. That's the source of everything. And so if we're complaining, again, you can't just change what you say. You need to change what's inside. You need to change your heart, and you're going to need God's help. But the good news is that he's in the business of changing hearts and changing lives, always has been, is today, and always will be. Now, you also need to know that there's also hope, because the people that the Bible calls God's chosen people had a complaining problem, a pretty big one. So in the book of Exodus, we talk about the Israelites, who were God's chosen people, and their exodus out of Egypt where they were slaves. I would encourage you to read it. It's a cool story, and it's all about redemption. But in the middle of all this, God is performing miracles. I mean, imagine being in the middle of the desert. You have no food, you have no water. But every day, food drops from the sky. Literally. Like, think about that. Food falls from the sky. And water just comes out of rocks. So you have everything you need, right? So this is what the Israelites were walking through. And this is what it says. When Pharaoh drew near to the people of Israel, they lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. Of course, that's a big army coming after them. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, get this, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not what we said to you in Egypt, leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? Like, we want to stay slaves. We don't want to be free. Who says that? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. So the Israelites had this complaining problem. And this isn't, there are many examples in Scripture of where I kind of feel for Moses, right? He's basically leading, I don't want to necessarily, I'm going to do it anyway. He's leading a big group of complainers that want to go back to Egypt, right? Moses has heard from God, has brought these people out of Egypt, has done miraculous things in Egypt. God has showed up in amazing ways. All of a sudden, he's brought them out. They're wandering around. All their needs are met, yet they find themselves complaining about just about everything. Maybe you can identify. Now, again, there's hope. These are God's chosen people. And also, we are that as well. So, this is also not just spiritual, and you need to know that complaining or having a lifestyle of complaining and being negative also affects you in not just spiritual ways. You can look all over the internet, okay? I was going to put who said this, but a lot of people have said this. There's a lot of studies out there. Repeated complaining hardwires the brain for more complaining. You probably have seen this, maybe in your life or the lives of others. People that complain are typically the ones that complain about everything. That's because it hardwires your brain for more complaining. You also become naturally more negative than positive when you complain, right? If you say something enough, you believe it. You say something enough, you become that way. And you also interpret your current circumstances, what's going on right now, based on your preconceived ideas. So, if you complain, you become more negative. If you become more negative, you have negative ideas about the future, about what you're going to do. And those ideas become more negative, and it's like this vicious cycle that happens. So eventually it has to stop, right? Ever taken a test? Anybody in here ever taken a test? An exam, a test, right? Anybody over here walked into an exam saying, I am going to bomb this exam? I want to see your hands. Anybody done that? How'd you do on that exam? Well, maybe you did good. I bombed it. I did. I knew going into it I was going to bomb it. I remember, so I have a degree in chemical engineering, which I'm not smart enough to do. It's only by the grace of God that I graduated. But here's the deal. I remember going into an exam one time, and I remember this. I got a D in organic chemistry. They're videotaping this. Awesome. I got a D in organic chemistry, and I remember the whole semester thinking, this is the hardest thing. I'm never going to learn this. And I went into the final, and I told myself this. I said, I've done so bad that I'm not even going to study. Do you know how I did on that final? I got a 60. Now, here's the grace of God. I had a 60 going into the final, which is a D, and I got a 60 on the final. Now, me being dumb like I was, said I worked just hard enough not to fail, But going into that final, I knew I was going to do bad. I didn't study. I didn't put in the work to even do remotely good. And I got the results. Well, honestly, I should have failed it. I really deserved to fail the class, but again, by the grace of God, I didn't. But I think life is that way as well. We approach situations in such a way, I do, where I approach them and I don't even prepare myself the right way because I have this preconceived idea about what's going to happen. And I would encourage you to change that. So complaining also has these physical side effects. So what do? How do we go against our natural tendencies to complain? And I'm glad you asked because I'm going to give you a couple of pretty simple answers. You're going to find these are extremely simple, but putting these to practice is also quite hard. So I'm going to give you two take-homes today that'll change your life. Take-home number one, if you can change your circumstances, do something about it. Like I said, this is difficult, right? Now, it's easy to hear this, but it's another thing to do it because complaining is the easy way. It takes no effort to complain. That's the natural thing to do. Honestly, that's the reason why kids are so good at it. Right? Right? I have to teach my kids not to complain. The natural thing is to complain about everything. I have a guy at work. Oh, God, it's videoed again. Yeah. So you ever complained about the weather? Anybody here ever complained about the weather? I mean, you don't have anything to complain about in Belgium. Nothing. Right? That was a joke. Now, I love Belgium, but the weather here is just, not ideal, right? And I'm not going to complain about it because, I mean, today is the type of day that makes you appreciate, right? Or the dark days make you appreciate the day like today. But I have heard a certain someone say, God, the sun is just up so long now. And I remember this is the same guy that was saying like it was only light for like 30 hours during the winter or something like that. And I looked at him and I said, are you ever positive about anything? At least he was honest. He was like, no, not really. And so I don't know if you can find something to complain about. But here's the deal. You can't change the weather. I've tried. I can turn the lights on in my house. That helps. But I can't change the weather. So I'll be honest with you. It does no good to complain about it. Right? I can't change who the United States president is. I can't change who the United States president was either. So let's just go ahead and say that I'm neutral. All right? For the sake of church. So, because I don't want to get in trouble. But when it comes to politics, I'll be honest, you can't change much. You can go vote, right? But after you vote, knock off the complaining. I promise you, people around you will appreciate it. I see on Facebook, and I think Facebook just ought to be like renamed like the Complainer's Paradise or something like that, right? A lot of it comes out. Oh, Trump this or Trump that, Obama this, Obama that. It does no good other than just bring death to people. And honestly, it just makes me not want to hang around with you when you're so negative all the time, right? Again, I'm going to step on your toes today a little bit. So complaining is easy. That's why children do it. Action is the hard part. So if you can do something about your current situation, do something about it. Financially, what can you do about your current financial situation? Complaining about it does no good. Complaining is not a plan, right? Maybe you need a budget. Maybe you need to stop eating out so much. Maybe you need to learn how to cook cheap meals, right? Maybe you should sell your expensive car and buy a cheap car. I don't know what it is. But some of the things, I think most of the things we complain about, we can actually do something about them. But me, not you, am too lazy to do something about it most of the time, right? So I want to call you to action today. If you have the power to change your circumstances, do something about it, okay? You want to lose weight. Maybe that's what you want to do. I see all fit people here. But I wanted to lose weight, so I started getting on a bike and riding a bike. And then I was sore, my legs hurt. And I remember coming home to Carrie, and she can attest to this. I would come home, and I'd be like, man, my legs hurt. And she'd look at me and say, well, you biked like 55 kilometers today. What do you expect? And you're overweight, and you've never biked before. Like, you're going to hurt. So she called me out. Thank you, sweetheart, for that. And I also want to clarify that identifying a problem isn't complaining as well, okay? I want to preface that. In order for something to get better, you have to identify the problem in the first place. This is part of what I do for a living. So how I make money and what I do for a living is I manage a plant where we make chemicals. And I have people reporting to me that sometimes complain. Again, guys, love you. You're awesome. See you Monday. But part of my job is to not accept the status quo or the way things are, but to find ways to improve. That's not complaining. Now, how do you think my boss would react? Let's just say I'm over budget, right? I have quite a bit of money I get to spend in my plant to make these chemicals, and let's just say I went over budget. And a lot of times in our personal lives, this is the way it works, right? I walk into his office, or he calls me into his office, and he says, "Hey, Nathan, I noticed you're over budget." And I walk in and I go, "Yeah, we're just spending too much money." And like, that's the end of the story, right? Or, "Yeah, one of my employees bought something expensive, and I just wish we'd stop spending so much money. I wish there weren't so much, the price of that chemical went up. Dang it." And I start crying, right? Imagine I did that in his office. What would he say to me? Well, actually, you probably don't want to know what he'd say to me. First thing he'd do is he'd laugh, because that's the way a child acts, right? My job is to do something about it. Now, personally as well, my job as the head of my household with my wife, and men, you need to hear this, is to do something about some of the situations you might find yourself in as a family. All right? You might not want to hear this, but you are the head of your household. That means that the majority of the issues in your household are your problem. And you need to do something about those and stop making excuses for the reason why those problems keep continuing. If you find yourself in financial issues, get help. You may not have the skills you need to get out of that financial issue, but somebody does, and somebody can help you. Maybe you find yourself looking at stuff on the internet you shouldn't, and you wonder why your marriage isn't blossoming like it should. Maybe I'm stepping on your toes, right? The statistics say that about 80 to 85% of men in the world look at pornography. All right? If you're having marital issues and you're doing that, let me just give you some advice. Do something about that. Knock it off. Stop it. Right? If you need marital counseling, if your marriage needs to get better, then search out marital counseling. Do something about it. Stop complaining about it. Right? Now everybody just hates me now. If you can do something about your current situations, do it and stop making excuses. All right. Take home number 2. We're going to move on real quick before I get in trouble and you guys start storming the stage. All right. If you can't change your circumstances, because some of them you can't. Again, the weather. I can't change the weather. I can't change who the president is, was, or will be very much. If you can't change your circumstances, change your perspective. So some of us need a perspective change. We need an attitude change. Again, the weather. When it's dark outside, maybe rather than just complain about it being dark outside, say, "God, thank you for the sunshine that is coming." Right? Because it is coming. And I don't know about you, but I've never lived somewhere that it is dark this much. And like a day like today, I have an appreciation for sun that I never had before. And I'll consider that a good thing to try not to complain. So maybe you need an adjustment. I want to ask you a question. Some of us see this glass one of two ways, and you probably know where I'm going with this. How empty is this glass? It's half empty, right? Is this glass half empty? Yes or no? Yes. What else is this glass? Half full. Every person in here is a half empty or a half full person. You like to hear that, don't you? No, but here's the deal. Everything in your life, all of us have half empty or half full situations. All of us. Now, granted, some of us go through some pretty lousy stuff. I'll get that. Deaths, you name it. And I'm not diminishing how big of a deal some of that stuff is. But God works in all things for the positive. In your life, He wants to take all your situations, even your half-empty situations, which look extremely half-empty, and He wants to make them half-full situations. And it's all about your attitude. God wants to take, in my life, He took a half-empty life like mine, and He's turned it into a half-full life. And He wants to do that in your life as well. And it starts with your circumstances. Individual circumstances for you have to become half-full circumstances, not half-empty circumstances. And when you do this and you start repeating it, just like we talked about before, that if you complain, the more you complain, the more you're going to complain. The more you complain, the more negative you're going to be. Let me ask you to do me a favor. Start switching that into half-full situations. Stop complaining about it. Be grateful for it. Develop a cycle of doing this, and you will become a more positive person. Right? There is hope. God is in the business of changing hearts and changing lives. He's never stopped that. And then we could basically sum up everything. I could have just showed this verse, and then we could just all go home. But here's what Paul said. Do everything without complaining and arguing. Everything. I know that this seems impossible. Does this seem impossible to you? I read that and I'm like, surely he meant some things, right? He meant, sure, do some things without complaining. And arguing, I mean, it's going to happen, right? No, Paul says, do everything without complaining or arguing. Or maybe some of you are in here and you don't know who Paul was, and you say, oh, that's easy. He probably had an easy life. Let me walk you through 4 things that happened to Paul that have never happened to me. Number 1, he was shipwrecked. I've never been shipwrecked. I cannot imagine being shipwrecked back then, right? He was beaten. I played rugby, so I've been beaten a little bit, but this was unwilling beatings. He didn't want to get beaten, but he got beaten for basically proclaiming the gospel. He was snake bitten. Anybody ever been bit by a snake? No? Me either. Sounds not fun. He was imprisoned. Don't tell me if you've been in prison. I don't want to know. But he was put in prison. And the cool thing is, Paul saw all of his circumstances as half full. He even, when he was locked up in prison, all right, get this. He was chained to a prison guard 24 hours a day for what they think is about 2 years, right? Anybody want to go into that situation? And here's the way Paul saw it. He even says in Scripture that he is basically chained up so that people can hear the gospel. So Paul didn't say, oh, pity me, oh, worry me. He didn't even, to be honest with you, cry out to God to loosen the chains. He saw it as an opportunity. Because for Paul to be chained to a prison guard gave him, I don't know how long their shifts were, let's say they're 8-hour shifts. It gave him an audience to talk about Jesus for 8 hours. Maybe your situation is the same and you need to see it that way. Maybe God has put you in a situation that is not good right now. And I know the story of some of you, and I know your story is not fun. It's not something you would wish on anyone else. But maybe God has you there, just like that prison guard, where you can now speak to someone that you may not have been able to speak to before. You can have empathy with someone you may not have ever been able to have empathy for. There are people I can't minister through because I haven't walked through their situations. Maybe you have. And so maybe you need to start seeing that horrible situation as a half-full situation, not just a half-empty situation. And I'm going to read 2 sections of Scripture which are extremely hard to hear, but I believe that God wasn't messing around when he penned his word, and we can learn a lot from them. Philippians 1:12-14 says this. This is Paul that writes this. And I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything that has happened to me here has helped me spread the good news. For everyone here, including the whole palace guard, so this is when he's chained up to the palace guards, knows that I am in chains because of Christ. And because of my imprisonment, most of the believers here have gained confidence and boldly speak God's message without fear. And then also, and I'll be honest with you, this next one, I don't really like it very much, but I choose not to leave it out because I think it's true. James, who is the brother of Jesus, says this. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind, not some kind, but when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Okay, if you're walking through a bad situation right now, this is not my first natural tendency, is to consider that bad situation an opportunity for joy. However, again, a half-empty situation can become a half-full situation just by a change in our attitudes. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. So every situation can be a half-full situation, and it's all about our attitudes. So, how could Paul and how could James say something like this? Because these are not easy things to hear. I can assure you that the first time I ever faced a difficult situation, or even now if I face one or when I face one, this is not the first thing that naturally comes out of me. But for Paul and James, and I want you to look at me and really pay attention now, they were not the center of their story. And I want to ask you right now, really, who is the center of your story? If it's you, like it is naturally for me, then I will tend to complain. I will tend to face a situation and see it as half empty and not half full. But, and this is the big but, this is the big but of the sermon, all right? Right? Is that God, if God is the center of your story, if the fact that Jesus Christ lived the sinless life you could not live, died a substitutionary death you should have died, rose victoriously, is seated at the right hand of the Father, right? And if you have given your life to Him, there's hope. And God can take a messed up life, a half empty life like mine, and can turn it into a half full life and use it for His good. And this is the choice we have today. It's a choice we always have. Do we see every situation with God at the center, or do we see it with me at the center? One of them is going to lead to life and thankfulness and gratefulness and God being glorified in that situation. Or it's going to lead to me being at the center and I'm never good enough. And this situation I wish was different and I'm going to complain about it. And just to be very transparent, I have this real inclination because we don't have family that lives here. And I have caught myself being very tempted to complain about that, right? Having somebody to watch the kids or just being close to family is refreshing. But God is not the center of my story. God brought us to Belgium for a reason. I believe that standing here right before you now is part of that reason. I don't know what all good God is going to do here, but I do know that the half-empty situation we find ourselves in as a family right now, without family around, that hurts everybody. Man, it breaks my heart. Is a half-full situation because I get to be around you guys. And I would have never met you, never would have had the opportunity to speak into your life, have you speak into my life, had we not stepped into what could be a half-empty situation. And so I personally choose to see it as a half-full situation. So what is it in your life that's half-empty? Because God wants to turn it to half-full. And make Him the center of your life. Again, He died the death you should have died. Rose victoriously that you can't do. And has provided a way for you to spend eternity with Him, not separated from Him. And maybe you're in here today and you say, I don't know Jesus. I've never given my life to Him. I don't know God. I've never wanted anything to do with God. Listen, God is for you. He's not against you. He knows the plans He has for you. They're plans to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. His love never fails. God is love. He is hope. He is joy. He is peace. And if you're in here and you lack those, He's who you need. You can try to get hope and joy and peace and love and all these things from what the world offers, but I'm going to tell you, it's going to leave you half empty all the time. God's the only person that can take your half empty situation and turn it half full. So I want to pray for you. If you're in here and you've never given your life to Jesus, I want to give you an opportunity to do that now. Or maybe you're in here and you've seen that your life is mainly negative, that you complain too much and you know it. And maybe today is your day, which I pray it is. I really do pray it is, where you say, you know what, enough is enough. I know that I might be the closest thing that the people around me see to Christ, and I need to start showing Him in a better light. I need to give them something to hope for. I want to be other than this world. I want to look like Jesus. And maybe that's the decision you need to make today. But I'm convinced no matter who you are, me included, all of us face a decision here today. And God is here to change hearts, man. He has always done it and always will do it.